So with Hollywood Brown getting injured in the Chiefs' first preseason game, the wide receiver room just got way more interesting considering one player is continuing to stand out at camp and even had the catch of the game last week. Meanwhile, another stock continues to fall as he cannot stay healthy on the field. So I've got to talk about that, the cornerback 2 battle being more difficult than ever, as well as more highlights from today's practice. But first, how about those? All right, first up, former Chiefs quarterback Alex Smith was a special guest out there at today's training camp practice, which was awesome to see. Alex will forever be a legend in my eyes for what he did while in KC, but also as a person in general. To overcome all that he did physically with all the surgeries, almost losing his leg, then coming back and even playing in the NFL for a bit. And then more recently, the trials his family has gone through regarding his daughter and her recent battles with cancer. He's been through a lot, and how he's handled everything has been top-notch, so I've got nothing but respect upon respect for Alex Smith. Next up, today the guys were back in pads after a lighter 10-10-10 practice yesterday, and the players absent were as follows. Defensive end BJ Thompson, NFI list, wide receiver Hollywood Brown, shoulder/clavicle, and offensive lineman McCade Matire. He's dealing with an MCL tear after it was feared he tore an ACL, so he might actually be back out there sooner rather than later, which is some good news. Then safety Brian Cook was also missing as he's expecting a child soon, so it was an excused absence. And then running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire was out due to illness again. He missed yesterday as well, and that most likely either has to do with the PTSD flare-ups he's been having or another bout of sickness due to the cyclic vomiting syndrome he's been diagnosed with and struggling through. And with CEH out for the second day in a row, guess who got reps immediately after Isaiah Pacheco? For the first time, I believe, all training camp, it was actually not Derrick Prince, but Carson Steele. Steele is a guy who, in my opinion, inked his way onto the 53-man roster after a standout performance against the Jags. I think one of those running back spots is basically his to lose, whether it's RB4 or as a fullback on the roster. I don't think it really matters. Anyway, Carson Steele not only worked in with the first-team offense today, but was also the first-team protector on punt returns and even worked in as a returner on kickoffs a little bit. Special teams is a way that Steele can really shore up a spot on the 53, because if he could contribute on offense as a running back, catching passes out of the backfield, as a pass protector, as a fullback at times, and also on kickoffs and punts, Dave Toub can easily say, hey, he's valuable to me, and that will only help Steele's case here. Offensive coordinator Matt Nagy spoke about Steele today, saying he's been progressively getting better and better by the day. He's in the right spot at the right time, and you can trust him back there in the backfield. And that's honestly some pretty high praise there from Nagy. Of course, Steele has things he can still work on, but I liked hearing that from the Chiefs offensive coordinator. Then there were only a couple of players out there at practice, but not participating, with those being defensive end Charles Omenihu, knee, defensive tackle Chris Jones, shoulder, and wide receiver Jaron Hayek, also shoulder. Omenihu is the only player still remaining on the physically unable to perform list. Then the CEO of Sack Nation could be seen on the sideline, though, as he did a little bit of rehab work trying to get right from that shoulder stinger he sustained last week. Meanwhile, linebacker Nick Bolton, who returned to practice yesterday, was seen back working in teams, but donning a yellow "Do Not Touch Me" jersey as he ramps back up from his elbow injury. And that's a positive sign for his progress, though it may be slow going. And while Wanye Morris didn't practice yesterday, he did come down in full pads and a helmet for today's practice as he aims to work through that bone bruise he sustained on his knee last week. Next up, after passing his physical yesterday and being removed from the PUP list, safety Justin Reed was a guy who was back out at practice for the first time all training camp on Monday. But yesterday was a non-padded practice, so the real question was, how much would he participate in today's padded practice? Well, he was in pads working individual drills, but didn't yet participate in teams as they ramp him up. That's no real surprise, and there's plenty of time to work him back. Just like Nick Bolton, there's no real rush here. You just got to get them up to speed, hopefully for the season opener against the Ravens, which is in the beginning of September. Another player still getting ramped up is left guard Joe Toney, who could be seen participating in lineman 1v1s, which is awesome. That's the next step being taken for Toney, and a definite positive. Speaking of the offensive line, Kingsley Suamataia is a guy who is very excited to have Toney back out there. Toney helps him see things, as the vet he is, that Kingsley does not yet see, so he's a valuable resource to him, and he's glad that Toney will soon be back out there next to him. Kingsley is the clear starting left tackle right now, working in once again at that spot with the first-team offense today. Kingsley then spoke with the media as well, today, saying he can never study the playbook too much, whether it's late at night or whenever really. Absorbing the playbook is the most crucial thing he's focusing on. Outside of that, it's just getting in more real reps. He loves being out there grinding. Camp flew by, and he will never forget his first ever NFL training camp. Matt Nagy likes where Kingsley's at. The padded reps are invaluable, so he can understand the speed of the game. Then after that, it's more just communication between the offensive interior line and the tackles. That's next on the list, and Matt noted that Kingsley is doing a good job with that. And before we get to some standout plays and players from today's practice, Nagy shared about a couple of players also, saying that with Hollywood Brown out, Justin Watson may be utilized a bit more, but it's not apples to apples here. It could look different every game that Hollywood ends up missing. On Xavier Worthy and how he's looked so far, Worthy is constantly growing, says Nagy. He and Mahomes had a couple of misconnections today at practice, and Worthy has been good at learning from the mistakes or miscues on the passes from Mahomes. He's had a phenomenal attitude, and he's catching on quickly. And then when asked about what he's looking for this weekend in the team's second preseason matchup against the Lions, Nagy's looking for less mental errors this week compared to last week. It's not always things that are going to show up on the stat sheet, but they are looking for guys out there in real game situations that don't make the same mistakes twice. Someone who's gearing up for a more impactful game, in theory, hopefully, is the rookie tight end Jared Wiley. He had an awesome touchdown catch today in red zone, with Mahomes lofting one up to him on this play-action pass, and Jalen Watson was all over the guy, but Wiley hauled it in and maintained possession for the score. You could also see Kelsey gassing him up, which was pretty fire. Wiley's a guy I'm going to continue keeping my eyes on, and I hope to see a little more from this upcoming preseason game compared to last. Wiley led all tight ends in snaps. I think he had like 24 snaps on offense, yet only had 2 catches for 5 yards. Another tight end, one I think is a bit underrated and also on a contract year, which is undefeated, is Noah Gray. He had a solid catch against the Jags, and another solid one here today at practice during 7-on-7 in the middle of the field as he turned to haul it in on his way to the ground. Next up, Phillip Brooks had a crazy catch here on this play where Joshua Williams got a hand on a pass to force a potential PBU, but Brooks stayed focused to the ground and reeled in the tipped pass as he fell for the completion. He had a bit of a push off there as well on Josh, but I'm not sure it would have been enough to draw a flag. Either way, a great catch there by the former Wildcat. Then here's a 1v1 rep against Skyy Moore and Trent McDuffie, with Skyy initially appearing to win on the release, but McDuffie wasn't fooled as Skyy tried to shimmy his way outside, and McDuffie easily broke the pass up. I mean, I don't know if this is fair. McDuffie is a top corner in the NFL, so it's a bit of a mismatch overall, but hopefully that only helps Skyy continue to get better. The Chiefs seem high on the guy after all, so we shall see how things continue to look for him as preseason goes on. Does Skyy continue working in with the first team offense this Saturday, or does he take a bit of a dip? My guess is he stays working pretty much in with the first team offense. Then here's another fun 1v1 rep between defensive back Nazeeh Johnson and Xavier Worthy. I actually liked this rep from both players. Let's start with Worthy first. What he showed here to me is the ability to fight off a physical corner to not only win the route by using his quick burst to get just enough separation, but also hold on to that football all the way to the ground, with Nazeeh not wanting him to maintain possession on their way down. For Nazeeh, he kept things close and competitive the entire rep, and while he could have potentially been flagged here for defensive holding, this stuff happens on nearly every single play. Sometimes it's called, but often it's not. So as Nazeeh bounces back from that hamstring tweak and then obviously tearing his ACL last year, this is a positive for him in my opinion. He didn't play in last week's preseason game, but we very well might see him out there this week. And with the cornerback battle for that number 2 spot still way up in the air, Nazeeh is going to be a guy to watch. He worked in with the first team defense today, so, the coaches are also keeping close tabs on Nazeeh. Then, for what it's worth, Jalen Watson is another corner that didn't play in last week's preseason game as he is ramped up from that shoulder injury he had in the offseason. He's a guy that will definitely be in the mix of that battle, as is another intriguing corner in Kelvin Joseph. Joseph was a guy that was rising early on in camp due to some injuries of others, and he was making the most of those opportunities, even being in talks as a guy who could be fighting for that CB2 spot. But unfortunately, he himself sustained an injury, a hamstring injury that sidelined him for over a week. Well, he was back working today, with Dan Harms noting he had nice coverage on a rep against Nico Remigio. So, as if there wasn't already enough players to watch in this cornerback battle, another one is back in the mix. But on the subject of the cornerback battle, Jaylen Watson spoke to the media today saying that starting camp late has been a challenge, but he's been pushing to get his legs and conditioning back. Now that he's back out there and Snead is gone, there's a position opened up and they are all gunning for it. It's a friendly competition though, and it's all love at the end of the day. This is his third year in KC, and there's always been a healthy competition, so it's nothing new with guys out there working to earn playing time out there. Watson is confident and trusts in himself, saying a strength of his is to trust his eyes and make a play on the ball. Now, this is interesting. Watson also spoke on his injury from last season, and it was even worse than I thought. He shared last year was quite the challenge for him because he played through most of the season with an injured shoulder, injuring it, I think, in week 2's game of the regular season. So while basically all of us knew that much, I don't think we realized that the shoulder kept popping in and out of socket on him. He said that practices were the worst because he wasn't taking anything for the pain out there, and his shoulder would often pop out of socket and he'd have to pop it back in. He didn't feel it in the games though because of quote-unquote help he received, probably pain meds of some sort, plus the adrenaline that was coursing through his veins. So he would kind of push through the pain all week during practice, and then during the game, he was pretty much fine. He did that all season long because he loves the game too much to have to end his season due to surgery, and he wanted to help the team win another Super Bowl. So at the end of the season, it was all worth it. Another guy who dealt with a shoulder injury last year but was sadly placed on season-ending IR before the start of the season was wideout Nico Remigio. Well, he reportedly made multiple diving catches today at practice, with Matt McMullen saying he made arguably the play of the day during sevens with one of those diving snags. Nico had a bit of an up-and-down performance in his first preseason game, muffing a punt that thankfully went out of bounds and nearly losing a stripped fumble on a deep catch for a scoop and score that was surprisingly overturned. So he's a guy that needs to keep making plays like this in practice, but also get it to translate consistently in the next preseason matchup against the Lions if he wants to make this roster. Another receiver to keep eyes on is Justin Ross, who had arguably the catch of the entire game for KC against the Jags. Sideline 50-50 ball, his cup of tea, it was fire. Well, Ross stayed busy here again today at practice, making a tough grab here down the field as he turned to snag it and reel it in. In a game, Deion Bush, number 26, who was barreling down on him, probably would have lit him up there, but that's not to say Justin couldn't have held on through contact. Ross then could be seen making yet another impressive grab down the left sideline with Jaylen Watson in coverage. This wasn't as impressive as his catch in the preseason game, but it was still a solid grab as Ross went up to get it aggressively, showcasing once again how he can effectively be used in Kansas City's offense. He's a rare body type in the receiver room at 6'4", the tallest guy there, and he's a guy you can use on the boundary like that, as well as in the red zone, and that's where he's most effective, and if he keeps making catches like that, he could very well climb his way to what could be yet another 53-man roster spot like last year, especially with the Hollywood Brown injury taking place. Ross is on the bubble, and this could tip things a bit in his favor, with the team possibly electing to roll with 7 receivers while Hollywood is recovering, because I don't think the injury is serious enough to put Hollywood on IR, so Hollywood's probably going to stay on the roster as one of the 6 or 7 guys in the room. And while Ross has had a pretty good camp so far, maybe even a bit better of a camp this year compared to last, Carrington Harrison of 610 Sports personally finds it funny that Ross's hype this season is way lower compared to last year. Quote, "Last year, the Justin Ross hype was out of control and the expectations were extremely unrealistic. This season, he's having a far superior camp and no one seems to care. Feels like Chiefs Twitter moved on." And while I get where he's coming from, I think the hype on Ross has died down because we saw him play roughly half of an actual season in the NFL, whereas before he was yet to even play a single snap in a real NFL game. He still only had 11 targets last year, catching just 6 passes for 53 yards. So I think Chiefs Kingdom as a whole is a bit cautious about putting too much expectations on the receiver room this year after how badly they underperformed last. Yet still, Ross does look good out there so far, and he's a guy I'll be watching out for this upcoming Saturday. Matt Nagy spoke briefly about Ross today as well, saying he's making plays, he loves his attitude, and has been very involved in the process all along the way. He then pivoted to another receiver in Kadarius Toney, who was back out there working for the second day in a row after missing several days of camp so far due to an ankle tweak early on, as well as more recently, back soreness or back tightness. For Toney, Nagy said it's just making sure he can get healthy so he's able to get out there and they can see the reps, which tells me they need to see him out there competing and really earn that spot on the roster if he's going to end up making it. At the end of all this, Toney could very well find himself the odd man out if he's not careful. Next up, the team got in some effective red zone work today with Mahomes executing this RPO nicely, slinging it to Rice for the score. And before I talk about this next play where Mahomes connected with Rashee, I also wanted to point out that on this play, Carson Steele was the running back working in red zone with the first team offense. Anyway, Mahomes then found Rice here in the middle of the field for a score and a Tony G style goalpost dunk. You'll love to see it. But what I really want you to watch here is Rice at the beginning of this route. If you watch him pre-snap, he's motioning inside toward Mahomes, then cuts back outside like he's running a corn dog style route. You know, the route they scored touchdowns with twice in Super Bowl 57 as well as once in Super Bowl 58 to win it all in overtime. But this time, Rice cuts back inside after appearing to run the typical corn dog style route back outside. This is actually some nasty work. Andy Reid was in his bag with this one. Just remember, the sport is a violent game of chess, not checkers, and Andy Reid is the one in control, the greatest offensive mind in the game. Speaking of the offense, things got a bit chippy here on this play during Andy Reid's infamous long drive drill, a drill that involves starting the offense on the 1-yard line and making them drive the length of the field. Well, on this Pacheco run here, the defense did a good job shutting it down, but linebacker Jack Cochran held on to Pacheco a bit too long for Kingsley Suamata'ia's liking, and Kingsley shoved Cochran a couple of times. The first time, he hit him in the face, and the second time, it was a pretty good push, sending Cochran back a bit. Well, Turk Wharton then shoved Kingsley back like, yo, cut that ish out, you little rookie. He's not little, but you know what I mean. And the funny part is, Pacheco actually got in the middle of all this here. Like, guys, please relax. He seemed completely unbothered by it all. The icing on the cake about this play to me, though, is Drue Tranquill attending some weird dance move with his groin at the end after he and Mahomes shared a quick couple of words. What even is this dance move, first off? Second, it doesn't even matter because that is hilarious. Drue Tranquill stays on 10 out there. I like the fire, and speaking of players with a little fire under them, you guys got to let me know your thoughts on why linebacker Jack Cochran has basically been involved in every single camp fight that's happened over the last 2 seasons. Is it just me, or could we have ourselves a little instigator on our hands? It's too many times now to be a coincidence, but honestly, I don't mind it. It keeps the entire team on their toes as well as the coaches. And with that, I'll see you guys after tomorrow's practice. So until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?